Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
This episode is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Didn't file with TurboTax last year? That's in the past. Now, Taxes is getting the TurboTax app and filing your own taxes for free if you didn't file with them last year. File by February 18th. All tax forms, all 100% free. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. New filers and filers who didn't use TurboTax last year only must start and file your own taxes in-app by February 18th. Excludes TurboTax Live. Full terms at TurboTax.com.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Hey, Chicago. What do you say? Cubs gonna win today.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. Time for the baseball podcast with national baseball writer David Brown. David, how are things going?
Hi, Andy. I'm doing great. It's we're the dog days. It's not the dog days yet. Is that August or? Well, anyway, we're going great, and we're talking about the All-Star team and the mid-season classic and all that fun stuff. Baseball has a little juice right now. It's a little momentum building.
What are the dog days supposed to be? Those are just the hottest days of the summer? Is that supposed to be the dog days?
Yeah, the dog, maybe the dog as far as, on the porch with the tongue out, like that.
Gets under the porch.
The monotony of the season, maybe a little bit. We're not, so this is, we're not there yet because the trade deadline has to happen. And then after that, then the dog days will happen.
Well, I mean, thanks to Rob Manfred, the draft or the All-Star week is chock full. They fire the Futures game off on a random afternoon on a network that no one knows what it is until the 4th inning. And then the draft is crammed in there too. And then you've got to wedge in the home run derby and then the All-Star game.
Well, people wonder, why aren't they making trades yet? And I think it's because they're like, well, we got to plan for our draft. And everybody, who plays fantasy baseball knows how time consuming that is. Imagine planning for a real draft. So, that's why the trades aren't happening yet. It's because they got a draft right now. It's not really great timing as far as that goes. But since when has Rob thought?
Yeah, it does. It seems odd that, they needed to move the draft because it was weird to have it during the College World Series and have the team draft a guy and then him go out and throw 145 pitches that night for Texas and get all mad and scream at it. But they didn't even move it back this far, right?
Right. I don't know, getting to like, what's the answer to this? I'm not sure because it seems like there's always some kind of hang up or excuse we could give for moving the draft here, but not there. And it's not like during the World Series, they're not going to make those irresponsible decisions with the pitchers anyway. It's just that the pitcher isn't affiliated yet with his major league, employer. So it's
right,
different. But it isn't.
Right, but at least if the guy threw 145 pitches, it would happen before you picked him.
Right.
And you could be like, all right, we're not picking him. We just watched his arm fall off on ESPN. So we're not going to do that. But anyway, the All-Star rosters have been selected. Cub fans were delighted that our favorite Cub, Shota Imanaga, is going to be. And then the Craig Counsell put out his what he's planning to use as his pitching rotation, and Shota will be able to pitch in the All-Star game because he's not going to pitch on Sunday.
Oh.
So that'll be good. And then all the other Cubs that deserved to make the All-Star team also did. But, we talked about this right before we went on about how should we do the hack thing where we talk about snubs. And it's like, well, by the time you pick these bloated rosters and then half the guys, my hammy.
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody makes it anyway.
They might be on the team. Why complain about a guy that isn't there when he might be 48 hours away from making it?
Yes. But you identified a bona fide snub. He may end up on the team, but we don't know.
Yeah, the guy who didn't. There's one guy. It's like there's two classifications of snubs for me. It's not even necessarily snub is not a great word because there's a million different ways the guys get picked for the teams, and it isn't always who's the most deserving overall, but like, well, who does this group vote for? We got to make sure this thing is satisfied and that thing and positions and blah blah blah. But and I've totally forgotten his name. And
his name is Brent.
Oh
Rooker.
Yeah, Brent Rooker. Brent Rooker, when I looked, was like 6th in the American League in. It wasn't OPS adjusted OPS, but it was the Fangraphs version, WRC Cola Plus, which sort of accounts for all your stats and adjusts them to what the league is doing. He was like 6th in the league, not among outfielders, but among hitters, and he's not on the team. So I think that is the snubbiest snub of them all. The Orioles are complaining about, well, Jordan Westburg didn't go, and we only got 3 guys, and Kimbrel, they're complaining that Kimbrel didn't make the All-Star team. But the thing about that is, maybe it would be nice if Kimbrel made the All-Star team, but A, you got to cut somebody, and B, there's like 3 or 4 guys like Kimbrel who could say, well, we deserve to be on the All-Star team too. So snubs aren't really, when you talk about, well, this guy could have made it, or 5 other guys like him could have made it, then that isn't really a snub. That's just bad luck.
Yeah. You can't keep them all, so somebody is going to not go.
But Brent Rooker, that'd be a good story. That's too bad. But like we said, maybe tomorrow he'll be on the team. And then off again with some injury himself and replaced by some other guy. He's
a really interesting player. He's, like his OPS plus is 155, which is obviously very good. He's slashing 278, 353, 537. He has 18 homers, 54 RBIs. He's going to be traded, almost guaranteed. So he's going to get to finish on a different team. He has struck out 104 times in 281 at bats.
As people ask,
when Brent makes an out, you pretty much he's not. You don't have to worry about him hitting into a double play. He's not going to do it because he's just going to strike out.
Well, it's still good production for that roster. That's not a great lineup. And Oakland is not a great hitter's paradise. So most of the time, so that's why his adjusted numbers are even more stark. Not Jason Stark, but than his raw power, his raw strength.
Yeah, and I think strikeouts when they come with production aren't as big a deal. Like it's an eye opening when a guy is struggling and he's striking out a lot. It's like, well, Christ, he's just not making any contact. When a guy is productive and is striking out, you live with it because it's just an out, and it's only one.
And remember, it's sort of like these days everybody's striking out more. So even though that's kind of an obscene amount of strikeouts, it is. I agree. It's not that much more by percentage than the typical player. It's not like this is 1990 and he's striking out that often. You know what I mean? So it isn't that bad in that sense, just for him.
And I would guess he didn't make it because he's an A. And they're like, we don't need two of those, which is not a great way to do that, because if even a bad team, if it has two really good players on it, should probably have two all-stars.
Yeah, I don't even know. Well, you know what? There's some pretty boring all-stars that like the Guardians have. Josh Naylor got off to a hot start, but he's not a lot better than 3 or 4 guys that didn't make it. And there was somebody else too. Stephen Kwan's having an extraordinary first half, and it's kind of fun. So that's okay. David Fry. David Fry's a nice story. He's not much on defense, but he's come out of absolutely nowhere to slug a whole bunch, over 600, I think. And he doesn't really have a position, but So, but there are questions about you can pick apart anything at this point. So,
yeah, I identified a snub in the American League, and it's I think it's because the team record is so bad. But despite his recent surge offensively, Martin Maldonado did not make the All-Star team.
He has home runs this year he's got like 7 hits and 4 home runs, and 2 of the home runs, one of them is against the Guardians, and one of them is against the Twins. So he's coming to play in the big games for the White Sox against the division rivals. So
he has surged. He had 2 homers in the last, I think, 3 days. He's now slashing 108, 165, 200, and his OPS plus is all the way up to 3.
Oh, it's not negative 54.
No, it's not negative anymore. He got it. He's on the right side of it. Whew.
But doing that with great defense that's not supported by any evidence whatsoever.
Right. No, it gets gritty leadership. That's what he's got. That's what it looks like. He's playing good defense.
Hey, if make it until you fake it, or some order of that.
But like we mentioned, they did move a few years ago. They moved the draft to the All-Star week because that was somehow going to get it more attention. I don't understand why they thought they were going to do that. And they have done their best to try to make it a TV show. So it's like the other drafts where they invite the guys who are most likely to go in the first round, and their families are there, and they sit awkwardly on round couches, and then they go up and they try to Rob Manfred tries to convince them to hug him. But unlike the other drafts, one big thing is missing, and that's the little buzzer goes off and we have a trade. Nothing more exciting than when a team is on the clock, but all of a sudden their logo changes to another team because there's been a trade, and we got to find out what the trade is. Now they did make a change a few years ago. The compensatory picks you get for whatever they call it, if you're in the payroll, the tax receivers or whatever, and you get an extra pick. You can trade those, and those do get traded.
Boring, statistical reasons.
Yes, but you can't just trade a regular draft pick. And do we know why you can't trade draft picks?
Well, I don't know. Was Bowie Kuhn the commissioner when the draft started in 1965? I want to say he came along a little later, but he might have been, I guess.
We got to ask Rick Monday. Right. The first pick ever.
Well, this is Tuesday. We're going to have to wait 6 days, Andy. I don't think we can. Oh, I see. Rick Monday is his name. The reason is they're afraid that the teams that have draft picks are going to trade them all, and for now they're going to sacrifice all of tomorrow for today. So they don't. It's sort of like alcoholism, I guess. You're not supposed to have any. So it's not like limiting the teams to maybe one trade a year of draft picks. You can't do it at all. So that's basically why they say, we don't trust you that you're not going to trade your draft picks and somehow get rich on this season for tomorrow, for the sake of tomorrow, which is funny now because these teams all probably way overvalue draft picks.
Yeah, they'd be hoarding. They'd be the opposite. Like they'd be hanging up on teams trying to get their draft picks.
Right.
No. That's my job security. Nobody knows if that guy is going to be any good. I'm going to keep him. But yeah, Rick.
That's kind of been the rule ever since Rick Monday was drafted. So it goes back all the way to that. And I bring up Bowie Kuhn because he's the guy who stopped a decade or so later the A's from selling all their players to the Red Sox.
Yeah, I figured it was an A's. It was an A's rule. It was a Charlie Finley rule.
It's it's not unrelated.
Well, and they did have the first. That's who picked Rick Monday.
Right.
Or the A's. 1965. He was the first draft pick ever in baseball. It's an interesting first round. The Red Sox had the 5th pick, and they took Tony Conigliaro's brother, Billy.
Jeez.
The Indians took Ray Fosse.
Had a long career.
The Cubs had the 6th overall pick, and they took because let's see who owned him in 65. That must have still been PK. Was he dead by then? I don't know. But they took Rick James. They took Super Freak.
Wow. But he was not available because he had fled the draft, the Vietnam draft, and was hiding in Toronto. I might be mixing up my history there.
Gene Lamont was the first round pick of the Tigers, 13th pick overall.
Wow.
Bernie Carbo went to the Reds with the 16th pick.
Great athlete.
Good stuff.
Yeah, Gene Lamont from like
Kirkland, Illinois.
Kirkland, yes, like
Hiawatha High School in Kirkland, Illinois. I scored 19 points in a quarter in Hiawatha High School once. You know how many points I scored in the game?
19?
Yeah. Got hot for 8 minutes.
Did we have a 3-point shot at that point?
They did.
Okay.
They did. And I needed it. 9 of those 19 points came on 3-pointers.
Yeah.
Did
you win the game?
No, that's why I was scoring. The Kirkland had lost interest.
Oh, right. Well, you got to get when you can. Get yours while you can.
Yeah. In fact, it was one of the few games that it might have been the only game my mom and dad didn't go to in my whole, like, from junior high through high school.
Really?
And I remember I got up in the morning, I could hear Dad downstairs talking to my mom, and he was reading the paper. And he's like, oh, hell, we should have gone. And he actually had a good game.
That's how they found out?
Yeah, he read it in the box score because I had gotten home a little late and we hadn't touched base. And then I told him, and he's like, oh, I guess we really didn't miss anything then. Like, yeah, you didn't.
Well, that's kind of an impressive reverse flex, if you will. Because usually the stories are about how you couldn't get, my mom and dad, they went to every game, or we couldn't get them out to a game. That's like the extreme. It's like they had no interest whatsoever. That was kind of my wife's family.
Well, it was because we were bad, and they had something else they could go to that night. And Dad actually asked me if it was okay if they didn't come. And I'm like, honestly, I don't want to go, but I have to because I'm on the team. So if you guys don't want to go, don't worry. And they missed it. But they didn't really. When I regaled him with the highlights of the fourth quarter, he felt better about not going.
Well, that's pretty cool that they went to most of your events. I just wanted to shout them out for that.
Yeah, they did. They were at everything. For all of us, all 3 of us. So they put their time in. So that's enough Class A high school basketball chat from the
people can relate. It's all right.
From the early 1990s, but I just think they should let them trade. You can put like the NBA has the Ted Stepien rule where NBA teams can't trade. You have to have a number 1 pick every other year because Ted with the Clippers was just selling them.
Right.
So you could put some guardrails in that would force teams to not just sell them all to the Yankees. I'm sure that was their fear back in 1965.
Right.
I mean, the Yankees were using entire teams as they were using whoever was in Kansas City at the time. I guess that was the A's.
Kansas City A's, yeah.
Hey, we need a good young player. We'll just go get one from the A's. It was their other minor. It was like having another 5 minor league affiliates, and one of them was actually the big league team of the.
But when scouting was in the state of, well, let's go get Tony Conigliaro's brother. It wasn't exactly. They still kind of, I think, guess more than the other sports in baseball. I don't have I can't prove that, but it seems like to me there's just a little more guessing in baseball than there is.
I read something about the drafts like in the 70s where literally some teams just would like after the first few rounds we're going through the Street and Smith's college baseball
right
preview, and that's how they were picking names basically at that point. That's how much effort they were putting in. And then I think Oleg and I were amazing praz with the tales of how the draft used to be a conference call.
Yeah.
And it would end for your team as soon as you didn't pick.
Right.
So like in the 30th round, if you were done, you passed and then you couldn't pick again. But if another team wanted to keep picking, you could pick until you were done picking. And it might be one team left at the end picking over and over and over again. You know, because the draft wasn't 61 rounds long, but the Dodgers took Mike Piazza in the 61st round because the draft was it could be infinity. They could still be picking in that same year if there's teams that were willing to pick guys.
And I'm no labor lawyer, but it strikes me that definitely is an egregious example of violating someone's rights.
Yes. Yeah, it's to guarantee there are no undrafted free agents, basically.
Right.
Because a few teams are going to sit there and just pick all those guys up, and then they can't negotiate with a team because they're assigned to that team.
Right.
And I kind of wonder if that was why there weren't, because they never did the draft like in one place. It was just everybody sat around in their conference rooms with their Charlie's Angels speakerphone and they yelled into it. If that's why they, in the early years, they like, well, how are we going to do trades? We're all already on the phone. It's like, well, can't you go get another? Isn't there 2 phones in there? Can't you call teams from another phone? But it part of it seemed like it was like something they had to do. Like some teams clearly didn't take it all that seriously, or at least their prep. They got there. It was like they didn't study for the test, and they're like, "Oh crap, how many guys we got to pick?" Oh, shit. And that's how Carlton Fisk's kid gets picked. And didn't the White Sox take his daughter? I know they took his son.
Oh, you're thinking of Ron Schuler's daughter.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was just the end. But that was a good example of the draft ending when you ended it. Because there was no harm at the end in picking, cutesy picks. Because you didn't really waste a pick because you would have just not picked.
Well, the White Sox also have that history of
being weird.
Yes. Doing something for publicity.
Yeah. What good publicity it is, too.
Right.
Really endear you to your fan base. Oh, good. We never drafted softball players. That'll help. Well, it did help with Ron Kittle, I guess. Now that I say it.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
So there are, continuing in the theme of All-Star Week, which is coming up next week, they tweaked the home run derby rules again. Just when you thought you had them figured out, they tweaked them again. This is probably a good change. The first round will no longer be timed.
Yeah.
But they're capping the number. But this is a thing that I believe on ESPN, they didn't know as they were explaining. Carl Ravitch was explaining the rules. They didn't know. It says there's 40 pitches. Is that 40 pitches that you swing at? Or is it literally 40 pitches? So if a guy if your designated thrower fires off a couple of bad ones that you don't swing at.
That would be 40 swings, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you call it that if that's what it was?
I would think.
My impression was that it was pitches.
I think it's pitches. So there is some pressure. There's double pressure now on the guy. Not only does he have to, keep you happy by grooving it, but he's not even allowed. He could waste a few of your opportunities with egregious misses.
I just wonder. I mean, it becomes almost like a home run derby pitching contest then. Yeah. Partially, than just a home run derby.
I mean,
because then, like you said, we put the pressure on the guy throwing. I mean, the home run derby rules are things I don't think about until like the thing is happening. So, and then don't think about again until they change the rules again or the next contest. So I like the idea of not untimed, but I don't know about this idea of pitches versus swings. So.
Yeah. I mean, if they had these rules back when, I mean, it was bad enough when Chris Bryant was in it and his dad was, was pitching him tough.
Yeah.
Chris might not have gotten any, he got the bat on like 6 of them with Mike firing them all over.
That's kind of how he hits now.
The other change is, the other change is it's not head to head in the first round. The 4 guys, they are going to do it in pairs still. They're going to alternate, I guess. Well, are they? They don't have to. They can just go in order, I guess. The guys with the 4 most home runs will advance, and then they will seed it based on how many home runs you hit, and they'll have a little bracket to get to the finals.
I think I like that.
Yeah, because there were sometimes you had like 2 of maybe the 2 guys who had the 2 best rounds went up against each other, and one of them was out.
Right.
The other thing I think they're trying to do with the limiting the pitches is a lot of these guys under the timed one were wearing themselves out. Sure. And like some of the biggest rounds ever happened in the first round. And then that guy sometimes he didn't make I don't think Julio Rodriguez made the finals. He was exhausted from hitting 48 home runs.
Right.
And now it wouldn't allow Bryce Harper to cheat and beat Kyle Schwarber.
Right.
With it. Clearly got the last couple off after the horn had blown. But,
well, it's like those like the referees in NFL games letting the Aaron Rodgers get a pass off after the play clock hits 0.
Yep.
It's already infiltrated itself.
But there's been some talk, the home run derby, you've got the big event for the hitters. What could you do for pitchers to show off their skills? And they had ideas like you could do target pitching, almost like the NHL skills contest where they put the little breakable things up in the corners of the net and the guys have to hit them. You could set up something like that. Pitchers could dazzle you with their control, which would be fun for about a minute. And then you'd be like, okay, we get it. What else we got?
How about a Manfred dunking booth? I shouldn't steal your thunder. Maybe that's what your idea is.
No, but I had heard that too. And they said, okay, that probably wouldn't go. But what might be fun would be if you could dunk. You could pick a teammate to dunk.
That would be funny.
Yeah. But my idea was, and I don't know if they still do this in the home run derby, where they used to do it, where they would pick like 8 lucky fans, and your hitter was they assigned you one of the hitters, and he could win you a house. Remember that contest? Well, I'm going to bring that back, but we're going to put a twist on it. They're going to pick. I guess we could pick 8, but that'd be too many. We'll do 3 or 4 fans, and that fan is going to get a choice. They can either wear full catcher's gear, they can just wear the catcher's helmet and mask, or just a batting helmet. And what they're going to do is, based on what equipment you pick, you're going to get in the box, and a real all-star major league pitcher is going to hit you with a pitch. And if you pick the full catcher's equipment, you win $5,000 when you get hit. If you wear just the mask, you're going to get 10. But if you go up there with just the good old-fashioned one-flap helmet, then you can win a house.
Right.
Because that's the risk, right? That you're going to take one in the face. But you're going to have a new house. I mean, they'll show what the housing crisis in this country is worth when the Hunger Games of trying to win a house by stepping in. See how hard Paul Skeens can hit me. And you trust that Paul will hit you in the ass and not the ribs or the head. But, pitchers get excited.
I think you've got an idea here that's worthy of, if they made a sequel to Basketball, they could put this in the in the montage of this is what sports have become again.
Well, that ties in with my other and I know people love my other tweak they could make to the home run derby, and I know people love to watch the kids run around the outfield and catch the balls that don't go out.
Yeah.
I don't know why people like to watch that, but they do. But I have a different idea.
Yeah.
So I think we can get our top scientists on this. I think they could make a trampoline that is basically the size of the warning track that arches all the way around.
Uh-huh.
And so say, let's say you get picked, you're in the home run derby, and you're paired up now in the second round against Pete Alonso. you have brought, not only have you brought a pitcher, but you have brought one of your teammates who, while Pete Alonso is hitting, will be out there trying to use the trampoline to rob home runs from Pete Alonso.
Oh, that's great.
So the Cubs would need to get somebody in, but say they could send little Pete Crow Armstrong out there running around, bouncing off trampolines, trying not to break his neck.
Did that basketball league ever go anywhere where
Slam ball.
trampolines?
I believe slam ball is where White Sox weirdo John Schifrin got his start.
Oh, come on.
I think he did. I'm pretty sure John Schifrin is an old slam ball announcer.
It's a simple phrase, White Sox weirdo, but I kind of like it.
Maybe not. John Schifrin slam ball did not bring up any results, but I thought I heard that.
You're thinking of something.
Because there have been a couple of iterations of it, and I thought he was part of the second.
Well, let me tell you, Andy, I think that's where he should go back to.
Yeah.
Even if it's not where he came from.
No, he's bad.
And it's not even, we're transitioning into something here. Maybe I shouldn't even. It's like, it's not even like the product that's bad. And it is, but the stories I hear about people tell, I don't want to say it like, well, this might not be true. This is what reporters are saying. He's like going up to Luis Robert and saying, hey, did you hear my call of your home run last night? You know, the growl?
With my little kitty noises?
Did you like it? It's like, dude, this is not a fantasy camp.
Yeah.
You nerd. Get out of here. It's so embarrassing. It's just, I mean, I don't wish ill on anybody except a few people. But what a mistake. What an incredible mistake. The worst mistake the team has made since the Harry Carey fumble. So,
yeah. And I mean, it's like the 21st century version of it, because in the 21st century, you weren't going to have a couple of announcers who were half in the bag, who were,
right,
calling the players' wives horny broads and, the stuff that Jimmy and Harry were doing. But in the 21st century, you would get a guy like Benetti who would just realize there's 162 of these and we're just not going to take them all that seriously. We got to have some fun. Somehow annoying his nonagenarian owner to the point where he knew he was not welcome. And so as soon as somebody offered him a job, he took it and left. They're not the same thing, but they're a lot closer. If you think about it, the Sox had Harry while the Cubs still had Jack.
Right.
And Brickhouse he's famous. He's an institution. I was too young to really I don't remember him at all, but every highlight I hear, I just think, how could you listen to that guy for 3 hours?
Right.
It would drive you nuts. So the Sox fans had it all. They had the entertaining guy, and then not only does he leave, he goes there. He immediately fixes the Cub broadcast for them.
Right.
Congratulations. But you're right. So the part of the reason why the trades don't happen earlier, especially now, is teams are complaining that their front offices are overtaxed because they are prepping for the draft. And I know that you have amateur scouts and pro scouts, but for both the draft and the trade deadline, they try to do all hands on deck. You want to get as many inputs and many people looking at things as possible. So as soon as the draft ends, all these people will turn their big brains to the trade deadline.
Yeah.
And there are a few teams that find themselves in the strange situation, given the extra wild card and the fact that almost everybody is in it. Like, for example, the Cubs, this has felt like a terrible, terrible season. They are one win behind where they were last year at this time. And then last year at the time, they were buyers. They were one of the few teams to actually trade for a bat. They got Jeimer Candelario. And then they got the great Jose Cuas to put him over the top. But there are teams who are in a similar situation where you're in it enough that you probably shouldn't just sell off guys. You should probably continue. But you can... I guess what I'm trying to say is I think we put too much of a label. Everybody's either a buyer or a seller, right? Why do you have to be either?
Right.
I want to get your opinion on this because I shot my mouth off about this a couple of times the last week about how if it's all started with this idea that if the Cubs aren't sure they're going to keep Jed Hoyer beyond this season, which I think they are, I don't think they're having any discussions over there getting rid of little Jed. But if they are, that they shouldn't let him make any trades because they should let the new guy, whoever the new guy is, come in and do it. And I said, well, number one, it's ridiculous. If you're going to get rid of him, get rid of him. Just do it. And if you're not, and this is the part I want your opinion on because this was my big theory, teams aren't as active trading as they used to be. And I think it's because teams overvalue their own prospects and they paralyze themselves. But there's kind of two times in the calendar year when teams actually talk trades to lots of people, and that's the trade deadline and the winter meetings.
Right.
And if you're trying to rebuild a team or even just take a team that is in the midst or what you think is like the end of a rebuild, but you're still adding talent, you can't sit out one of those two because say, okay, we're not going to talk to anybody at the deadline because we are not sure what we're going to do. And then when the season ends, because it's really hard to get a lot of teams to engage because they're just not that interested. And you've got two built-in times when you can do it. And if you don't take advantage of it, you've just wasted 50% of your opportunities to trade.
You've wasted an opportunity to get better. And I think that, you're definitely on to, they're afraid, they overvalue the resources that they have. And not just like, they overvalue the idea of the resources they have. It isn't even so much the talent of the players that they have. It's just the whole concept of this guy's in the minor leagues and we're not paying him major league wages yet. And what he could be in the future is something amazing. So that's why he has more value than this other established major league player. It's a little bit of that too. It's that the whole idea of, well, once you've paid a guy what he's worth in the majors, he's somehow spoiled. And it's not the kind of the bloom is off the rose and value goes way down because you have to pay him the going rate. So there's a little bit of that. And there's also just fear. I think the teams, I don't know if if it's a function of thinking that player salaries are more than they used to be. So it's, they're just afraid to make mistakes. I think it's a little bit of that too, that it's the worst thing in the world if we trade somebody from the minor leagues and they go from, and don't get anything back.
Yeah. And
they go from this asset to, it's almost like they overvalue their mistakes. They overvalue the people that get away. They're afraid to make changes because it's going to make them look like they squandered these amazing resources. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword that people don't want to use.
Well, and to use the Cubs as an example, Jed said it's been more than a couple weeks ago now, he didn't want to duplicate the mistakes they made when they were building the World Series team, and he felt like they traded too many young assets away to try to win now. And I thought, who did you get rid of that was really that good? And so I actually went and looked. I actually looked at every single trade they made from 2015 on, and the best player that they traded was Gleyber Torres. And most of his WAR came in that 1 year where he hit 1,000 home runs against the Orioles.
Yes.
And then Eloy would have been Dylan Cease has turned out to be a good player, but he's already onto it. They actually probably could have got him back if they really wanted him that bad. The White Sox put him up for sale. Eloy looked he was going to be a good player, but he got hurt. And there's just a lot of And it's like, okay, it troubles me that you feel like that was too risky when what you did, you actually proved the opposite, which was you could trade these guys and chances are you should be able to identify big leaguers who will have a guaranteed impact over the potential impact of the prospects. And every once in a while, you're going to give up a guy and he's going to turn into a really good player. But they didn't really even do that.
he's not even understanding the lessons of what he did to help them win a World Series.
Right. Yeah, it was like, oh God, that's bad. If you really believe that, if you don't believe it, if it's just BS, you're feeding the media to try to tamp down expectations that you're gonna make moves. That's one thing.
Think it is.
No, I don't think it is either.
I think they really think that way.
Yeah. And we used to have these conversations way back, like when Jim Hendry was wheeling and dealing, firing prospects off the thing, actually making like impactful trades.
Right.
Like he stole the Ramos Ramirez and he stole Derek Lee, and fans seem to get like, fans love nothing more than when you get a really good player and the players you traded end up being, like Bobby Hill and Kevin Hart. It's funny that they're not the comedian and not the cartoon character. And they don't amount to anything. But honestly, sometimes you actually like need one of those prospects you trade to be good, to turn out to be a good player, because that helps you when teams are like, well, should we deal with the Cubs? No, everybody they trade sucks. None of their prospects turn out to be any good. Why would we trade for any of them?
Right.
I think we had that discussion when Dontrell Willis all of a sudden was really good for the Marlins. And it was like, why didn't they just keep Dontrell? This is a disaster. It's like, well, it's not a disaster, right? Because now teams, you have a track record of, well, no, there are some good players in that system. If we can get our hands on one, we're willing to make these trades.
It's not all crying wolf with, oh, this is the next big thing. This is the next big thing, and it never happens.
I say that though, and at the same time, look at the Braves in the 90s, who traded how many like top pitching prospects and got good players for them. I'll trade a lot of them to the Cubs. And the only one who ever turned out to be any good was Jason Schmidt.
Right.
Like they never got burned by it. And teams still couldn't like take their prospects, couldn't get enough of them. Give us some more. I remember Steve Stone, who we were kind of talking about a second ago. He had a great line one time during a Cub broadcast. And he basically said, if John Schuerholz calls you and offers you a pitcher, hang up. That guy is not going to turn out. And John knows it. And he's going to sell you really high, and he's not going to get burned by it.
Well, you mentioned, you made mention of one of the deals that Hendry made, getting Aramis Ramirez and Kenny Lofton. Lofton was more of a rental-ish, but Ramirez was a guy, that was a trade that they made that helped them. He was a good player for years.
Yeah, for a decade.
One of the better, he's not a Hall of Famer, but he's in that class.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but he's being inducted this month into the Cubs Utility Tunnel of Fame. So
hopefully
him and Kerry Wood
will see it well.
Him and Kerry Wood are both being inducted this year. So, that's better, I think, than the real Hall of Fame. The Utility Tunnel of Fame.
It comes with much less overhead.
You get a royal blue jacket to wear.
There a jacket? Oh,
there's a jacket. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Pat Hughes wears it to church.
With his mismatched belt and shoes.
And his awful sweater.
Yeah. But just closing your point, you can make trades for when you're competing for a division or whatever, the playoffs, that will help you beyond that season. I think if you look at it like that, that's probably a good way to train your brain, if you're a front office geek, to not worry so much about what you're giving up and what that might look like in 6 years if you're adding a major league player who's going to be on your roster and helpful for a number of seasons. Ramirez is a probably an outlier to some degree because, guys like that don't come around that often, but still there must be other examples of players who were traded to contenders on a deadline and then helped them beyond the first 5 minutes.
Well, so John Greenberg did a story on a 20-year retrospective on the 2003 Cubs last year. And he talked to as many of the guys as he could. And he talked to Aramis. And one of the things Aramis talked about was the knock on him in Pittsburgh was that he wasn't a hard worker.
Yeah.
And he's like, I didn't get it. He said, I took extra ground balls. I took batting practice. I did all this stuff. He got traded to the Cubs. And he said within a few days of just watching Sammy and Moises, he's like, shit, I don't work hard enough. And he just started to emulate them. Now, I don't know that he went to Sammy's Magic Pharmacy. I don't think he did. But he talked about how, going from one organization to the other, the biggest difference he saw was he realized he wasn't working as hard as he could have, and it made him a better player. And that trade turned out to be, it was like you couldn't have made a more perfect trade. Right. They had Corey Patterson gotten hurt. They didn't have a center fielder. They didn't have a leadoff man. They didn't have a leadoff man when Corey was healthy. But and they got Kenny, who was great for them. In fact, if not for Alex Gonzalez and Stevie Bartman in that order, the battle would have been who was the NLCS MVP, Kenny Lofton or Sammy Sosa. That's how good Sammy was, or Kenny was. And then they fixed third base for 10 years with Aramis. You couldn't have made a better trade. And I tried to give some examples today in the newsletter of the kinds, these weren't specific trades because I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but like the kinds of trades that the Cubs could make and any team could make that aren't they're not really buying or selling trades.
Right.
Like the Cubs have, supposedly they have a really good farm system. I think what we're seeing is that like the Cubs have 7 players in Keith Law's top 50, but I think none of them are above 20 and a bunch of them are in the back half, which means they're good. They project to be good players, but they're not really big impact players. Where the Orioles, even with all the guys they promoted, still have this like ridiculous amount of players that other teams are drooling over. So when the Orioles call you, you're much more excited than when the Cubs do. But the Cubs have a solid group of prospects. And one of the problems they have is that some of those prospects don't fit into the positions where the Cubs have need right now.
Right.
And some of them don't have position at all. In fact, the 3 guys they're sending to the Futures game are Matt Shaw, Moises Ballesteros, and Owen Casey. And Casey is a big dude who can stand in the outfield, but probably shouldn't be playing in the outfield. And Ballesteros is a fat guy who really can't catch and probably can't play first base. And Shaw is a college shortstop they're trying to make a third baseman out of, but he might be better at second base. So basically, their 3 best prospects don't have positions. But that doesn't mean they don't have value, and it doesn't mean other guys don't have value. Like they've got their outfielder they got in the Chris Bryant trade, Alexander Canario, has been really good when he's played for the Cubs. And he's been really good in AAA, and the Cubs just don't seem to. They either feel like they don't have a fit for him, or they're just not that enamored with him. And actually, it was another Cub fan Twitter user, Infield Fly Girl, who lives in Seattle and watches the Mariners all the time, and she's like, "Why don't the Cubs just call the Mariners and see if Alexander Canario plus something else can get them Harry Ford?" Because the Mariners think they have their 2 catchers, and the Cubs don't have a catcher. And that's a trade. You're not buying or selling. You're basically trading 2 AAA players for each other because your needs match up.
Right.
And then there are players who, if you're willing to spend a little money, that are available, like Randy Arozarena. The Rays want to get rid of him because he's going to enter years 2 and 3 of arbitration, start to make real money. And I'm sure there are players in the Cub organization that they would be interested in. The Cubs could use a bat like Randy. So that's the other kind of trade you could make. And then I thought it would be fun for the Cubs to steal Jackson Churio's little brother, Jason, from the Guardians, who's only in Class A. I mean, it's not a deal. He's not going to play in the big leagues for a few years. But I just figured if the Brewers are going to have Wilson Contreras' brother playing for them, the Cubs should have Jackson Churio's little brother playing for them. But those are the kind of trades you can make that you're not necessarily buying or trading. It's a better allocation of your assets,
right,
than what you currently have. And that's really what trades are supposed to do. I've got a surplus in this area. You've got it in this area that matches up with a deficiency that I have. Let's trade some guys.
Well, the people that made those trades would make those trades in the past are, I don't know if they're gone from front offices or they're neutered or what. There are just a whole bunch of people in front offices that bring different skill sets or, they're less inclined to do it. I don't know. They can't see it. Maybe they don't have the vision for it, but they're all about figuring out, well, let's get a bunch of these guys in the low minors, and maybe they have value, maybe they don't, but they're, that's like from a bygone. I mean, we don't see those kinds of deals made anymore because I think those people don't have any power in the front office. I think that is they're. I hate to sound like one of these people like Jeff Fry or not Gaetti on Twitter who complain about who's running these teams anymore. Jonathan Papelbon. I don't know if it's because of that or do they have a point or whatever, but the guys who make those kinds of trades don't have that kind of power anymore.
Yeah, and that's why I had joked that if the Cubs fired Jed, they should let Jim Hendry be the general manager for a month. All right, work your magic. But there wouldn't be another Jim Hendry for him to call.
Right.
And actually just hammer out a trade.
Right.
It's kind of amazing trades get made at all, considering how many people now weigh in on everything in every front office.
Right.
So, we got to run this by the analytics guys. We got to run this by this. We got to go to the owner because because we might have to take on a little cash, and he or she isn't going to want to do that.
People complain about field managers being overruled by the people in the front office, but the people in the front office are overruling themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, they've set up a circular firing squad for themselves. And so maybe it's a miracle that any trade ever actually happens.
Yeah, right.
Well, that said, I've got a list of some guys. I want you to chime in on whether or not what the likelihood that they're going to get traded at the deadline.
Yeah.
And I started jotting these down in no particular order. So even though there are multiples from teams, they're not even right next to each other. White Sox pitcher Garrett Crochet.
Yeah. I would say pretty likely because they, that's been the talk. It doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense to me.
No.
Thinking about, why wouldn't you? Don't you want to get better at some point? And he's not old.
No.
It's not exactly Eric Fetty being traded. I guess that makes sense. But Crochet's, in his mid-20s, and I know he's got an injury risk, and he's already been hurt. He's already lost a season plus. But I would say it's pretty likely, and the White Sox have kind of made a bunch of mistakes, and I think it's probably a mistake that they would trade Crochet. So I think they'll do it. Yeah,
it's one of those where you're going to hopefully get a guy back in the trade who might be as good as he is
someday, like Cease. I mean,
but I agree with you. I think it's inevitable because they just leaked last week that they couldn't. They offered him a contract extension. And he didn't take it.
Yeah,
which is their way of saying, "Hey, Sox fans, don't get mad. He didn't want to stay, so we're going to trade him." Even though we offered him $100 million contract, $1 a year for 100 million years, and he turned it down. How about Bo Bichette?
I hadn't really looked to see who are the teams that need shortstops. It would make that's a guy that would make sense in your world. A team like the White Sox. Well, I don't know. Colson Montgomery doesn't look great at AAA, but there's got to be a few other teams that are sort of like that, where their shortstop isn't, and maybe he could use a change of scenery. But he's really not flowered.
No, he's been bad this year.
So I don't know that I think maybe they kind of missed their chance to trade him because I don't know if they're gonna get anything all that good in return. So I would say maybe 50-50.
Yeah, I mean I guess you look at his stats and he's 26 and you look at his OPS pluses for the beginning of his career were 144, 127, 121, 128, 122, and now it's 72. And teams look at that as, there's a buy low opportunity.
Right.
The team that he's not been linked to, but a team people think will be very interested in would be the Giants, a team like that, who don't have a shortstop. They got Nick Ahmed playing there right now. They try to put Brent Wisely there sometimes, and he can barely make the throw. And they've soured on Marco Luciano. So this would be an idea that, assuming he passes their physical.
Yeah.
Because they thought they fixed shortstop for 12 years, and then they didn't. But a team like that. But I mean, if you're the Jays and you don't have to trade him, I think you just as soon hope that he turns it around in the second half, and then he's got a better market after that.
I think they'll sort of roll the dice that Vladimir Guerrero will pick it up a little bit more and maybe concentrate on extending him. And then if Bichette, you were reading some interesting numbers for Bichette, but they're also kind of in a decline a little bit. So he started out good, and then the league apparently adjusted to him, and he's not. So even if he was playing like he did last year, he was still disappointing last year, and maybe even for the season before that. So,
well,
I don't.
After the pandemic, his 3 full seasons, 21, 22, 23, his OPS are basically the same: 121, 128, 122.
Yeah.
So there's a level there, and that's a solidly above average big league player, especially at shortstop. So there's value there. He's better than a lot of teams' other shortstops, but then you wonder, well, what the hell happened in 2024? And if this is the start of something, then you get him and he's bad.
Yeah.
What about Cub outfielder first baseman Cody Bellinger?
I would say he's a really good trade candidate. I don't know. I think it just depends on, have the Cubs decided that this team, which is so similar to last year's team, is it not a contender? And if it's not, then they probably should trade him. So I would say maybe 75%.
Okay.
Probability.
I think the concern with the acquiring team for Cody is his $27 million player option for next year.
Yeah.
And so I even heard somebody ask, could the Cubs do a trade where they do the trade and there's a player named later in the trade, and if Cody opts into that deal, he becomes the player named later, and the Cubs have to take him back? And the answer to that is no. Baseball changed that rule. One of my favorite trades of all time was Dickie Knowles was traded from the Cubs to the Tigers for a player named later, and Dickie was the player to be named later. He got sent back.
We don't have Dallas Green around anymore, speaking of no one for Jim Henry to trade with.
Which I thought of last night when I saw Joey Amalfitano speaking at the Willie Mays tribute. And I was like, well, if Dallas was still around, he'd come out and fire you again. But I wonder if you could structure a deal for Cody with a player named later in it that is contingent on, like, the quality of player you get back is contingent on whether Cody exercises that option or not.
Right.
So that if a team gets stuck with him, because the only way he's exercising that option is either if he doesn't finish the season strong or he gets hurt.
Right.
And you're like, oh shit, now we're on the hook for $27 million. And the Cubs get a lesser prospect in return if Cody exercises the option than they do if he doesn't.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know if you can do it that way or not. He has not.
You can say future considerations, and that's what it can mean. Yes.
Yeah. He has not been as good this year as he was last year.
Yeah.
He's hitting the ball on the ground a lot. Almost no slug. He's slugging .411. He slugged .525 last year when everybody's worried about him not hitting the ball hard enough.
He's doing those things that everybody worried that he might do based on his secondary numbers.
I mean, his last year with the Dodgers, when the Dodgers couldn't get rid of him fast enough, he had 19 homers and he had 27 doubles. He only slugged .389. He's on pace right now for fewer homers, 17, and about the same amount of doubles, and he's at a .411 slug compared to that .389. So, we also know from watching him, he's a good baseball player. Like, he's a valuable guy to have on your team, and without the player option, a lot of teams would line up still to get him. And he can play all 3 outfield spots. He can play and really well. He's a really good first baseman. He's a good base runner. But he's not. If you can't give up the return for an impact bat right now because you don't know for sure you're actually getting an impact bat.
Yeah.
If you get Cody. What about Luis Robert?
Yeah, sort of along the lines of the mistakes that the White Sox are probably making with Crochet. I don't. He's at least when Robert is healthy. If you're gonna compare him and Eloy with the injury business, Robert can make an impact. Eloy, he's never really turned into that great of a player. Robert, you can still see it. He's still will make plays in the outfield or when he throws the ball.
Yeah.
Or
How many
on
outs
the
are
base
there?
paths, or they should. I mean, the White Sox are so bad, and they've already built up the farm system. I mean, I think I would say it's maybe 50-50 that he gets traded, and they probably should hold on to him and build around him. But what
Yeah,
do
I agree. He's signed through 27 at
Yeah.
$22 million. 15 million next year, 22. Oh, there's a $2 million buyout. So 20 million in 26 and 20 million in 27. So you have other chances to trade him too if you want. I kind of feel though like the White Sox are going to feel compelled to make some of these trades just because the fans are living through this awful season, and it's like, here, look, we're bringing all these young players. It's like,
It's
well, okay.
their idea of showing them something shiny.
Yeah, even though most of the fans are like, yeah, well, it would have nice to could you trade other things than those two? Guy I mentioned before, Randy Arozarena.
Yeah, that name, that's definitely something, and that's a guy you want to talk about like a postseason performer. Bellinger has those bona fides, but Arozarena really does. And a team, I mean, the Twins don't really need too much, but that would be a great guy to put in left field for them. It would make their lineup really killer. And I think that the Rays are definitely they're always very pragmatic about things, and I would say that's maybe 90% chance that he goes somewhere, and they get a lot for him.
Yeah, and his overall numbers are terrible this year, but he hit 291, 424, 468 in June, and 261, 350, about 400 so far in July. So his overall stats are not indicative of the way he's played recently. What about another Cub, Ian Happ?
No, they're not going to trade him.
Come on. No, they're not. And even if they got an offer, no, we can't. He's one of our building blocks, a 30-year-old outfielder. That's what we need. Jack Flaherty.
I would say 100% if, excuse me, if as long as his back and whatever else is ailing him holds out. He's gotten some issues with that and his old shoulder issues. And although the Tigers, they've had AJ Hinch as a manager for years, and they've been hoping to make that move from terrible to good. And I think they're just terrible to mediocre. So that would, they're not going to get any closer to the playoffs if they don't have someone like Jack Flaherty in the rotation. Thinking about next year, they're not going this year. I would say it would be funny. What would be funny is if the Orioles traded for Jack Flaherty again.
Yeah.
But this time it worked.
Yeah. Well, you're good now, so we'll take you back. We'll just do these we'll do the last two as a pair because they're on the same. Oh, the thing I was going to say about Flaherty was I read a thing, I think it was in The Athletic today, about, well, maybe they'll just keep him because they can get a comp pick, and because they're a revenue recipient, that their comp picks are higher. It's like, they're not. No, you're going to trade him, right? He's a pitcher with an injury history. If he's healthy at the deadline, you cash in immediately. You don't wait and then get nothing more later. Would be two national outfielders, Lane Thomas and Jesse Winker. Yeah,
Winker's had a nice rebound season. I think we're sort of waiting for that rebound season even last year or maybe the year before. It's been a while for Jesse. He's 101% going to be traded. Thomas, you'd be trading low. He hasn't had the same kind of season that he had last year. I don't know if he's actually that good.
Yeah,
but that's also a kind of a bargain, Randy Arozarena kind of a dude. If you don't want to meet whatever the raise price is, I don't see any reason why, with the Nationals' outfield prospects that they have up and coming, that they wouldn't trade him. And he might be able to help you, but I don't know if Lane Thomas is that good. But.
No, and I think it would be great if they traded Jesse to the Padres, so that him and Jerickson Profar can become best friends after the ridiculous dust-ups they had in back-to-back games. And I just wanted both those guys traded so that the Nats can play James Wood in left field, and then I can use him in right field, so that I can use him in right field on my fantasy.
Well, that's we finally get down to what's important.
Yep. Come on, guys, you can do it. I'd also like to see the Rays clear a spot for Junior Caminero. So if you guys are listening out there, baseball land, just do me a couple of salads. Last thing quickly I want to talk about was these happen in baseball. Baseball has more stupid injuries than any other sport. Journeyman relief pitcher Colton Brewer had a rough day on Saturday. The whole day was bad for the Cubs. Kyle Hendricks showed up with a stiff back and said he was having a hard time walking. So they had him pitch.
How does that affect your pitch? Oh, I'm fine with that.
He goes, it hurt less to pitch than it did to walk. I'm like, it's great. I would guess you shouldn't have been doing either. And he lasted 2 innings. And then they went to Colton Brewer, who was worse, with presumably a healthy back. And when he came out of the game, he punched the dugout wall with his non-throwing hand.
Right. At least he was thoughtful enough to do that, right?
And however, still somehow broke it so severely that they immediately put him on the 60-day injured list, effectively ending his season. In the newsletter I had, I gave a couple of options, things softer in the dugout to hit than the wall, and I showed the Sean Rodriguez beating up the Gatorade jug in the 2015 wildcard game.
Yeah.
And Carlos Zambrano punching Michael Barrett in the head. Which might have been the softest thing at all that you could have. Now, the best part of that was I had to go dig up the highlights because I wanted to include them. And in the SportsCenter package that night, they have a long soundbite from Lou Piniella describing what happened. And Lou basically, he's like, well, I played for the Yankees and we used to do this, 3 times a week. He said, well, the worst part about it was that it happened again when they got to the clubhouse. And Michael ended up getting much worse of it in the clubhouse. So the punch we saw in the dugout was not even the good ones. Carlos really kicked his ass once they got to the clubhouse. But the best part was Lou talking about what a terrible thing it is, how it can't happen, with a huge smile on his face. The entire time. It's like, Lou, you can't look that happy and talk about what a terrible thing it was. I think it was twofold. Media, though, so. I think it was Lou happy that his team was showing some spirit, and also Lou happy that somebody had punched Michael Barrett repeatedly in the head.
Right.
So there's that. The Cubs have had some interesting ones over the years. Ryan Dempster once broke a toe jumping over the dugout railing after a win.
Right. I remember.
That was a good one. Sean Dustin missed a whole season because he was trying to put take Sean Jr.'s car seat out of a car, and he jacked up his back. Right. There's all kinds of good ones. But there's apparently Colton did see Bull Durham, and he did learn a lesson. Punching, although he wasn't punching a drunk, he was punching the dugout wall. But you don't do it with your pitching hand. But it still happened. And I found it ironic that the Cubs acted so quickly to put him on the 60-day injured list, considering with every other player, their initial diagnosis on no matter what your injury is, you'd find day-to-day, don't need x-rays.
Wait and see.
Yeah. And then a few days later, they finally do the x-rays and realize that you broke whatever it is in 18 places, and then they finally put you on the injury list. But, Colton was disconsolate. He was talking about how he let down. He said he let down his teammates. Okay, he let down the fans. Not really. We weren't all clamoring for more.
Depends on which fans you mean.
And he let down his family, which I believe he did, because it's going to make it that much harder for him to get a job next year. But oh well, that's what happens.
Imagine being his parents. All the driving to the games and the money spent on travel teams, and we're going to make Colton's dream come true, and then just starts punching stadiums.
Do you think they had a similar thing where, like, that on Sunday morning he was coming downstairs and he could hear his dad opening the paper, and he's like, he punched the dugout wall, he broke his hand.
He didn't tell me.
Colton just backing back up the stairs, back to bed. I have a similar story about here. It's funny. In my head, I could picture my room was right above the kitchen. So when I would come down the stairs, I got a concussion in a football. We didn't know at the time that I got a concussion in a football game, but so we were supposed to go. Ironically, this is true. We were supposed to. We played on Friday night. Kirkland was going to be who we were going to play next. Oh, it's perfect. Put a button on this with another Kirkland Hiawatha story. And a bunch of us were going to drive to Kirkland to go watch the game. I was do some scouting. Nothing. A bunch of high school seniors standing around. Go, oh, this is great. So anyway, I got home and I went to bed. And I wake up, and it's like 6 o'clock, but it's still dark out. And I'm like, what the hell? And so I come downstairs, and Dad's sitting at the kitchen table, and I'm waiting, expecting him to say, what are you up so early for? Instead, he's like, where have you been all day? And I'm like, what? And he's like, did you go to Kirkland? I'm like, it's 6 o'clock. He's like, yeah, it's 6 o'clock at night. I had gone to bed at, 11 or whatever, and I slept until 6 o'clock the next night with a concussion. And that's
what you're not supposed to do.
No, that, friends, is why I am the way that I am.
That sounds like Mets doctors.
It does. They thought I was gone. That's why they didn't come up to wake me up. They assumed somebody picked me up.
They don't know where you are.
Yeah, no, they don't, which was good. That was a great way to grow up. All right. Well, thank you. When we next meet, it'll still be pre-trade deadline. We'll be right in the thick of it. Actually, it'll be deadline day.
Well, right? I'll keep studying.
2 weeks? 60. No, it'll be the week before. But we'll know more. Hopefully there'll be some trades.
Yeah.
All right. Well, sounds good.
All right. We will talk then.
Thank you.
Many of us have herpes.
No, I thought it generally sucked. I didn't think it was a specific suck. I thought it was like an all-encompassing type of suck. So, we're going to try and rectify that. But for right now, I'm going to be pretty pissed about it.
It's fitting. It's got to be done with one of the best games of all time. Just unbelievable. Got to congratulate the Dolan family.
Sean, my podcast co-host Andy, you were his favorite player growing up.
Oh, thank you so much. Awesome.